One of the big questions I guess I wanted to start off and just ask you about is, we keep hearing about this SAGE group of, advisors to the prime minister, and they're all these scientific advisors. And I sat back today and thought, why isn't there an economist like you on that committee to advise on the ramifications of the economy, which is so massive? So just curious for your thoughts right away to that question.
Well, you're right that there aren't economists. I think they are largely epidemiologists who have, enormous experience of pandemics and how they evolve and spread out over time. And there's some very eminent people on it. But as you rightly say, no economists. And their focus, I think, is very much on the infection, how it's spreading, what you can do to try and reduce the infection rate and minimize deaths directly from COVID. And in some ways, that's a natural thing, that you want the scientists to give you their best view on the spread of the infection. But I think when it comes to actually making policy decisions, you would absolutely want the government also to have analysis of and advice on what are, if you like, the side effects of policies that might be very effective in reducing the spread of the virus and perhaps minimizing likely future deaths. What are the side effects of that? Some of which are health side effects, some of which are economic side effects, which in turn will have health impacts down the road. And I suppose in an ideal world, SAGE would do its analysis, and there would be, if you like, a sort of corresponding body that would be assessing the wider and longer term economic and health side effects of policies designed to control the infection. I think to some extent that is happening, but it's not happening in as formal a way as the SAGE procedure. And I think it's perhaps generating something of an imbalance in the kind of information that's feeding into government decisions.
Yeah, I agree. I think at first when people were trying to quantify the lockdown, in monetary terms, people thought, okay, that's very callous. We need to think about saving lives. But as this extends longer and longer, people keep talking about how the lockdown is going to affect our mental health, about how it's going to affect the economy long term. I think Lord Rose, a former chairman of Marks and Spencer, recently came out and said, for every day we're locked down, it's going to take 2 to 3 weeks to recover. And I think it's important to have these conversations, but it's hard to quantify it and get people to really understand the costs of a lockdown, isn't it?
I think it is very challenging to quantify. But I think the one thing we do know is that very restrictive policies kept in place for many, many weeks, months, indeed on end, are likely to have very substantial knock-on effects, negative knock-on effects on the wider economy, and also on mental health and other health issues as well. So whilst it's absolutely difficult to quantify these things, and there's always an element of counterfactual. Well, what would people have done if the government didn't impose the restrictions? Would they have self-imposed restrictions anyway? So there's very difficult issues about counterfactuals, what would have happened if. But I think to not put the effort into trying understanding those knock-on effects would itself likely lead to misguided policies.